After a 3 years long wait, No Man's Sky is finally here. All the hype, all the discussions and debate, all the vague and descriptive conversation has led us right here to this moment. Has No Man's Sky proven that it's the cosmic journey we all hoped, or does it fall into a void of expectation and disappointment? After roughly 50 hours with the patched game and no complete effort to get to the center of the galaxy, I've decided to critique not the destination but rather the journey. We'll discuss the lore and motivation of the game, I'll take a look at the technical aspect driving the creation of its universe and what sells you on the experience. We'll also look at the emergent gameplay formula that is the core of No Man's Sky's gameplay experience and attempt to answer the biggest questions surrounding the game. What do you even do in No Man's Sky? Right out of the gate, the game throws you into its universe with little context or reason why you're there, and how you got stranded. Searching your wreckage, you begin to piece together what your next steps should be. Right away, you're compelled by the Atlas, a mysterious force that beckons you to pursue it and asks you to decide if that's your choice. Immediately, the game promotes pure freedom to traverse its universe how you like, or if you prefer a more direct path through its experience. Outside of the Atlas and a few other small diversions that will pull at your attention, there is no direct story or campaign, so to speak, which is an interesting approach. The delivery of the lore is commonly through a text adventure-like mechanic that leaves it up to you to understand. Unfortunately, when making choices on how to proceed through the game, picking an Atlas or anomaly path leaves you feeling a bit like you're making the wrong choices for no particular reasons. Throughout these paths, you're presented with choices and items with no clear motivation or information as to why, and what to do with them, perhaps until you've felt the consequences of your choices. Without information to go on other than you should or you shouldn't, which lacks both context and meaning, it leaves you questioning the next step, and if you've made the right choice. And this can be a tough feeling when you have no understanding on what the consequences could be. A little bit of context and meaning goes a long way, and when you're missing both of those things, it begins to feel less and less compelling to stray away from the proposed main objective, which is getting to the center of the galaxy. Which is unfortunate because the sense of overwhelming presence those two objective points have when arriving to them for the first time is pretty enormous. When observing the three alien races in the game, along with the alien monoliths that litter planets in their respective solar systems, it's easy to see that the three races carry their own backgrounds. The Korvax entity seems to have a fascination with tech and the Atlas. The Gek come across as the pesky scourge of the universe, and the Vy'keen are the proud and brutal warriors. When engaging them in conversation or dealing with monoliths and solar systems that are centric to that race, you can generally guide the conversation with those backgrounds in mind to help successfully navigate those interactions. Sadly though, that is literally as deep as those interactions go. Even worse, that is literally the only thing the three alien races do in the game. Conversation with basic text-based engagement that is limited to an action and your choice of responses that are either successful or not. The three alien races unfortunately have little impact on the game outside of these engagements, and that saddens me as I would have loved to see a little more fleshed out. If anything, having them be more of a presence instead of a procedurally generated face on a screen while buying ships or interacting, I'd love to see them arrive in space stations, walking around, interacting with each other, and having a little more meaning in a game that asks me to care so much about their origins. Where No Man's Sky really begins to shine is in its tech. Compared to other games with procedural generation as its primary focus of creation, there really isn't a contest. The terrain generation alone is a wondrous sight and unbelievably well executed. There are moments where I just sat back in awe, soaking in a mixture of well-formed terrain mixed with colorful skies and interesting sights. All in all, the procedural process that's running in the game is wildly impressive, even if you run into some loose repetition now and again. While the game was originally thought to run at 60 frames per second before launch, I find it hard to be disappointed that the game actually runs at 30, considering all the inner workings. Most notably the game's dynamic lights and shadows along with reduced geometry pop-in. Speaking of pop-in, I'm not really willing to criticize the terrain pop-in much, for two reasons. Even more popular games that aren't procedurally generated suffer from draw distance and pop-in issues, and two, it's been greatly reduced since the game's unveiling 3 years ago. With terrain generation happening at this scale, I'm willing to accept a drawback or two with the scope of the game in mind. Can it be a bit distracting and potentially immersion breaking for some? Absolutely. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not terrible by any stretch. Perhaps the most distracting are the asteroids that sort of grow on the screen in front of you, I'm assuming to enhance performance, and knowing that you could be traveling pretty fast and have a large space rock pop up in front of you is a little bit frustrating. The scale of the game is perhaps what's most marvelous about it. The fact that there's always a few planets in the distance that you can travel to, land on, explore, and potentially find cool stuff still blows my mind. My main gripe with the procedural generation tech, mainly with its planets, is when you see a beautiful planet in the distance and when you attempt to land on it, it changes to something wildly different than what you expected when you enter its atmosphere. I once saw a planet that looked a lot like some hot magma planet, only to see it turn into something comparably different once I entered the atmosphere. That could be a little bit disappointing. In regards to sound design, No Man's Sky excels wonderfully. The soundtrack by 65 Days of Static is very well done and frankly isn't featured enough in the game. General sound effects being procedurally generated as well gives a wide variety of mostly non-repetitive sounds. Everything from a soothing atmospheric ambience to the hard-hitting sound of space combat is well executed. Also notable is the game has a few minor bugs to be ironed out, some comical while others may be a bit maddening. Hilariously, there are times when taking off from your ship, it quickly ejects you into orbit with seemingly no reason. It's good for a laugh, but it can be frustrating if you lose an awesome landmark because you can no longer locate it from space. And it's very good advice to save often, especially when you're preparing to warp from one star system to another, as it's not uncommon to have the game freeze completely on you during that process. I've experienced over a dozen lockups since the day before the game's launch, but I'm assuming that this is all working to be addressed with a patch soon. All in all, if you're the type of player that buys games that impress by pretty visuals, landscapes, and space goodness like Space Engine, Elite Dangerous, and Starbound, you're really in for a treat here. On the gameplay front, No Man's Sky focuses on emergent gameplay at its core, meaning that it simply tosses you into its universe with little direction while relying on its base game mechanics to push you to create your own gameplay experience with as little hand-holding and expectations as possible. Essentially, this means that the gameplay loop is yours to create. For better or worse, your mileage with this idea will vary on an individual level. Mostly my gameplay loop consisted of resource farming in an effort to attain that amazing starship and that beefed up multi-tool, all while following a gradual path to the center of the galaxy utilizing black holes. The game's recommended path is to the center of the galaxy, and along the way you'll find yourself more than likely trading valuable resources in an effort to gain cash to purchase that pretty ship you want, finding trading posts and other tiny buildings on planets that can have various uses anywhere from almost nothing to finding mechanical blueprints and recipes for precious elements. The tools you'll get to help explore planets are pretty useful, scanning and traversal of terrain while finding various methods to help locate important points of interest are certainly helpful. It is in this that you'll be spending most of your time on planets doing, unless pure wandering and exploration are your flavor of gameplay loop. Also taking into account the kind of planet you're on can determine the kind of experience you have. Various atmospheric and weather conditions on planets can hinder your exploration and mining efforts without upgrades to your suit necessary to prolong your time before needing shelter. Other distractions come in the form of bounty hunts that pop up, and if you're feeling brave, having the capability to attack large freighter ships to steal their resources can be a fun diversion, but sadly those two features come with little depth and little consequence, and not a lot of reward. After a while, visiting so many planets begins to show you the unfortunate reality of No Man's Sky. What it lacks is pure significance. Structures like operation centers, trade posts, monoliths, and ruins are all tiny, and the game never takes true advantage of the pure scale it's promoting, at least in the way of structures and other events that could occur. Space stations include roughly the same layout, with nothing wildly differentiating interiors enough to keep the experiences fresh. Ruins begin to feel repetitive and meaningless other than learning languages, and space itself lacks large spectacle like large space battles, ruined space stations, and freighters, and other cosmic events that are a real missed opportunity. Also, one big hole in the game, I feel, is the tragically missing social features of the game where people can share their journey together. And features once promised and not making the cut makes for a sobering experience for those that have high expectations. In general, if you love exploration, without a lot of hand-holding, impressive vistas, and experiencing little awesome sights here and there, this game is as advertised, and you'll have an excellent time with it. To sum it all up, No Man's Sky is an excellent visual experience with fantastic audio to help back it up. The sum of all its parts are worthy of the skepticism, but also worthy of trying it out to see if it's for you. I keep hearing that there's nothing to do in this game, and to some extent I might agree, so why can't I put the game down? I've thoroughly enjoyed the game as it is, but I'm left waiting for Hello Games to take true advantage of the wonderful foundation they've built. There's fantastic potential here, and my hope is that their post support really helps this game become what it really can be.